she had it all. The covers, the contracts, the runway moments that defined a generation. Amber Valletta was living every girl's dream in the 1990s, walking for the biggest designers and earning millions before she could legally drink. But there was something else happening behind those perfect magazine shots. Something she kept hidden from the cameras, from the industry, from everyone except the people closest to her. And when the truth finally came out, it changed everything we thought we knew about the golden age of supermodeling. This isn't just another success story from the 90s fashion world. This is about what happens when fame meets addiction, when perfection becomes a mask, and when the very industry that builds you up becomes the thing that almost tears you down. Amber Valletta didn't just survive the dark side of fashion, she survived herself. And the way she did it is what really matters. Tulsa, Oklahoma, 1974. Not exactly where you'd expect a future supermodel to come from, but that's where Amber Evangeline Valletta's story begins. Her childhood wasn't filled with casting calls or photo shoots. Instead, it was shaped by a hardworking single mother, financial struggles, and inner demons that would follow her for decades. Growing up in Oklahoma in the 70s and 80s meant growing up far from the fashion capitals of the world. While kids in New York or Los Angeles might dream of seeing models on the street, Amber's world was shopping malls, local diners, and the kind of middle American life that fashion magazines rarely acknowledged existed. Teresa Valletta was raising her kids on her own after separating from Amber's father when Amber was just 2. This woman was a force of nature, working multiple jobs to keep the family together. She went from waiting tables to postal work and eventually made it to the corporate side. She was also a fierce activist who wasn't afraid to put her beliefs into action. She even got arrested for environmental protests. The Valletta household was one where hard work was valued above everything else. Teresa instilled in her children the importance of education, perseverance, and standing up for what you believe in. But despite all this love and structure, despite having a mother who would move mountains for her children, Amber was already showing signs of the internal struggles that would define much of her life. But even with all of Teresa's love and hard work, something was already troubling young Amber. By age 10, she had discovered marijuana as a way to cope with internal struggles. This was self-medication from a kid who was trying to numb pain she couldn't even articulate yet. What kind of pain drives a 10-year-old to drugs? Well, Amber has never fully explained what triggered this early escape mechanism, but the pattern was established. When life became overwhelming, substances provided relief. This coping strategy, developed before she was even in middle school, would follow her into the most glamorous and dangerous industry in the world. When Amber turned 15, Teresa made a decision that would change everything. She scraped together money they didn't really have to enroll her daughter in modeling school at the Linda Lehman Agency in Tulsa. This wasn't some prestigious academy in New York or Los Angeles. This was local modeling training in Oklahoma, which focused on practical skills rather than high fashion dreams. The curriculum covered the basics, such as how to apply makeup properly, how to walk with confidence, and how to pose for photographs. Most importantly, for what was coming, they taught students how to present themselves professionally and handle the pressures of being scrutinized for their appearance. Now, this wasn't high fashion. This was mannequin modeling, literally standing in store windows posing like a robot every few minutes. Sounds exciting, doesn't it? Students would practice holding poses for extended periods, learning to make subtle adjustments to create visual interest while maintaining perfect posture. It was methodical, somewhat tedious work that required patience and physical endurance. But for Amber, this introduction to using her appearance professionally felt natural in a way that surprised everyone, including herself. And including myself, if I'm being very honest. There was something about being in front of cameras, about creating visual stories through poses and expressions that clicked immediately. A scout from Italy showed up in Tulsa looking for new faces. It was a small, almost intimate affair with local models from the agency. When he saw Amber, this self-conscious teenager who was still figuring out her own features, he recognized something that nobody else had seen yet. Within weeks, 17-year-old Amber was on a plane to Milan with no portfolio, no professional experience, and a drug habit that was already becoming a coping mechanism for stress and anxiety. The transition from small-town Oklahoma to international fashion capital was about to amplify everything in her life, both the opportunities and the problems. Milan in the early 90s was intoxicating for a teenager from Oklahoma. The city itself was a feast for the senses. Ancient architecture with cutting-edge design, cobblestone streets leading to the most exclusive ateliers in the world. For someone who'd grown up in strip malls and suburban neighborhoods, Milan felt like stepping into a completely different universe. The fashion world was undergoing a massive transformation during this period, moving away from the glamorous excess of the 80s towards something more minimal and raw. The supermodels who had dominated the previous decade, with their larger-than-life personalities and obvious glamour, were giving way to a new aesthetic that sought authenticity over perfection. Amber arrived at exactly the right moment to become part of this revolution, but she was also arriving as a vulnerable teenager with existing substance abuse issues entering an industry notorious for its drug culture. Her first real job came just 2 weeks after landing in Italy, an advertorial for Italian Vogue. She completely fell apart during that first shoot. The pressure, the unfamiliar environment, the language barriers, the realization that she had no idea how to be a professional model. It all hit her at once. The breakdown was complete. Tears, panic, the kind of overwhelming anxiety that makes you want to disappear. For most people, this would have been the end of the dream before it even started. But the photographer and other models on set recognized something in her that went beyond technical skill. They guided her through breathing exercises, encouraged her to connect with the music playing in the studio, and helped her find a rhythm that felt natural. When that guidance helped her connect with those childhood memories of performing and playing dress-up, something magical happened. The natural performer who had always been inside her awakened, and suddenly she understood what modeling could be. Not just about looking pretty, but about storytelling through movement and expression. That summer in Milan became her crash course in professional modeling. She learned to work with different photographers, to adapt to various creative visions, to handle the physical demands of long shoots. But more importantly, she learned that she had a natural gift for this work that went beyond her physical features. Living in a cramped Paris apartment with fellow model Shalom Harlow, one of my personal favorites, Amber was about to make a decision that would alter fashion history. The friendship between these two young women was based on more than just shared career ambitions. They connected over books, late-night conversations about life and art, and yes, smoking marijuana together in their tiny apartment. But it was in this apartment, surrounded by the chaos of two young models trying to make it in Paris, that Amber would make the decision that made her a supermodel. In 1993, long hair was still the absolute standard in fashion. Models were expected to have flowing locks that moved beautifully in campaigns and on runways. The industry was conservative about dramatic changes, and most agencies actively discouraged models from making bold changes to their appearance without approval. But Amber had always been someone who trusted her instincts, even when they went against conventional wisdom. She'd felt constrained by the expectations of what a model should look like, and something inside her was pushing for a more radical transformation. The waif era was just coming up, though nobody fully understood it yet. Kate Moss was starting to gain attention, but the full impact of this aesthetic shift hadn't been realized. Amber was about to become one of the architects of this movement, but first, she needed to take a risk that could have ended her career before it really started. Working with hairdresser Yannick Diaz on a beauty campaign, she already had a chin-length bob, but something inside her was pushing for more dramatic change. When she suggested cutting it all off, Yannick was genuinely shocked. Here was this 18-year-old suggesting such a radical transformation. He couldn't believe someone so young would be so bold about changing her entire look. A few weeks later, when Amber saw Yannick again with another top hairdresser, Ward Stegerhook, they both agreed it was time for the dramatic chop. They headed back to that cramped Paris apartment where she and Shalom were living, and they worked together to create her new look. The result was perfect timing and execution. Amber's new, short, sleek cut arrived just as fashion was embracing the waif aesthetic, which was a minimalist movement that challenged everything the industry had been doing. "We represented raw beauty, edgy and different," Amber explained later. "There was something sort of a little off." That little off quality became her signature. Within weeks, she was working with Steven Meisel, one of fashion's most influential photographers. Her career went from promising newcomer to industry darling almost overnight. At 18, Amber arrived for her first American Vogue shoot, feeling nervous but excited. Then stylist Brana Wolf delivered a devastating critique that would have crushed most people. She essentially told Amber she was cute, but that Shalom would be featured more because she looked better in the clothes. The rejection was crushing for an 18-year-old experiencing her first major fashion shoot, but photographer Arthur Elgort stepped in with a different perspective and suggested they focus on beauty shots with Amber instead. That beauty shot became her first Vogue cover. The image that was supposed to be a consolation prize turned into one of the most iconic covers of the decade, which launched her into the exclusive club of models who could command top rates and choose their own projects. Success in the fashion world. It can come with one picture. But success during the 90s came with a dark underbelly that most people never saw. The industry was notorious for its party culture, its normalization of extreme behaviors, and its tendency to reward models who embodied a certain kind of damaged beauty. For someone who had been using substances since childhood as a coping mechanism, this environment was incredibly dangerous. The very traits that made Amber perfect for the waif aesthetic, the slightly haunted look, the ethereal quality, the sense of someone existing on the edge, were being amplified by her growing addiction. From there, Amber became unstoppable. By 1994, she landed the Calvin Klein Eternity fragrance campaign, a multi-million-dollar deal that cemented her status as a beauty icon. Elizabeth Arden followed, and suddenly she was the face of multiple major brands. Imagine, an addiction that drove your rise to the top. 1995 was her watershed year. She was walking for everyone: Chanel, Valentino, Versace, Prada, Dior, Yves Saint Laurent. But one show changed everything, not just for Amber, but for an entire luxury brand. Tom Ford was taking over Gucci, and the brand was struggling. Once synonymous with luxury, Gucci had become dated and irrelevant. Ford's Fall-Winter 1995 collection was make-or-break time. For his vision of the new Gucci woman, Ford chose 3 models: Kate Moss, Carolyn Murphy, and Amber Valletta. They embodied everything he wanted the brand to represent: sexuality, glamour, and edge. The collection was a massive success that literally saved the brand. Gucci's sales jumped 90% in the months following that show. Like, wow, fashion editors who had been ready to write off the brand suddenly couldn't get enough. Ford had achieved the impossible. He'd made Gucci relevant again, and Amber had been the face that introduced the world to all of this. That single runway moment established her as more than just a successful model. She became a muse, the kind of woman that designers dreamed of dressing because she brought their visions to life in ways they hadn't imagined possible. So she's an icon, right? But behind every one of those covers, Amber was getting worse. Cocaine and alcohol became her best friends. And the worst part was that the fashion industry wasn't just romanticizing her addiction, it was also profiting from it. The waif aesthetic she helped create was all about looking ethereal, otherworldly, slightly damaged. Her addiction was making her perfect for the very look that was defining fashion. Think about how messed up that is. The thing that was destroying her personally was the thing that was making her professionally invaluable. The stories from her lowest points are devastating. She's described showing up to her dying uncle's bedside while high and drunk, desperately looking for somewhere private to use more drugs. How sad is this? She was risking every relationship, every opportunity, every connection that mattered. At the peak of her success, she was jeopardizing million-dollar contracts by showing up to work under the influence. The face of major campaigns, arriving at photo shoots completely incapacitated by the substances she couldn't stop using. As is often the case when you generate fame and money for others, almost nobody in her professional circle was willing to confront her about the problem. Her mother, Teresa, was virtually the only person who directly addressed what was happening, giving her the tough love she needed but couldn't yet accept. Most of her industry relationships had either deteriorated or were too fake to handle real, genuine intervention. By her mid-20s, Amber was facing a terrifying reality. She wasn't worried about her career or her money. She was worried about surviving to see 30. That fear, the genuine belief that her addiction might kill her, became the part for the most important decision of her life. At 25, Amber got sober, not through some glamorous rehab facility or celebrity intervention, but through the kind of hard work and commitment that her mother had modeled for her throughout childhood. Getting clean also helped her build meaningful romantic relationships. Amber Valletta's love life has seen some drama and some sweet moments, honestly. She was first married to Hervé Le Bihan for a couple years in the 90s and then later got together with Olympic volleyball player Chip McCaw, who she had her son Auden with in 2000, named after poet W.H. Auden. And yep, she embraced motherhood full on. Amber and Chip actually married in 2003 and stuck it out for over a decade before splitting up in 2015. Since then, Amber's been out and about sometimes with stylist Teddy Charles, and it looks like things have been happy and low-key for her lately. Basically, when it comes to romance, Amber's got stories. But her biggest relationship flex is being a seriously cool and loving mom to Auden. But here's what makes Amber's story truly remarkable. Instead of hiding her past, she chose to be completely transparent about it. In an industry built on perfection and fantasy, she started talking openly about addiction, recovery, and the dark side of fashion success. Her honesty wasn't just brave, it was also revolutionary. She used her platform to raise awareness and helped countless others who were struggling with similar topics. Apart from modeling, Amber also acted. But perhaps most importantly, she became a passionate environmental activist. Unlike celebrities who just talk about causes, she puts her principles into action. She's been arrested for environmental protests, and she's incredibly selective about brand partnerships to the extent where she refuses to work with companies that don't align with her sustainability values. She prefers using her influence to drive real change in an industry notorious for waste and exploitation. Today, Amber continues modeling for major brands, but on her own terms. Recent campaigns with Dolce & Gabbana, Versace, and Alexander McQueen prove that her appeal is timeless, but now her work comes with a deeper purpose. Amber Valletta might not be the first model that pops into everyone's head when thinking about the 90s, but honestly, she's an absolute legend who shaped that whole era in her own way. Whether strutting down the runway for Tom Ford's Gucci or fronting iconic campaigns, Amber blended elegance with this cool, crisp edge that made her unforgettable, even alongside superstar names like Kate Moss and Naomi Campbell. On top of all that iconic style, she's a major advocate for sustainability and ethical fashion now, which is so inspiring. Her legacy goes way beyond pretty pictures and totally deserves permanent respect in fashion history. What do you think? Does knowing about Amber's struggles make her success more meaningful? Let me know in the comments. Please take a second to like and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe. We love having you around. If you enjoyed this story, why not continue exploring in the same era? Click on Linda Evangelista's wild fashion story, or let YouTube decide what you probably want to watch next. Was it right? See you all in the next video.